Hello, my name is Daniel Sweetser, and I'm reading from my novel Hope Starts Small, and this is Chapter 4, Part 5, Sunset. Alma was not a young lady anymore. When the family had lived in town, she had once fallen while trying to deal with a spider. It took her some time to recover physically from that fall, but the experience had left more than just the bruises. She now realized she was constantly faced with that risk. And so from that point on, she always walked with a cane or a walker or holding someone's arm. She also became very wary of stairs, such that she avoided them as often as she could. What this meant practically was that more often than not, the family went to her rather than her going to the family. There were some occasions where she would venture out on a trip or an extended visit, but these were few and far between. Her clear preference was to stay put, and others would gladly acquiesce and come to her. This was a small thing, but it served as notice to those who loved her that Alma was not in the prime of her life. Her body was in its beautiful, delicate sunset. This, of course, meant that eventually night would come. Frank suspected that each daughter kept this in the back of her mind, but rarely brought it to the forefront, because the prospect would be so overwhelming. The irony of this was that while her body was beginning to decline, her heart was as bright and beautiful as ever, if not more so now. She was on her own, doing what she wanted when she wanted, spending her money how she wanted to, and it was as if she had been holding her breath for so many years and finally had the opportunity to exhale. For most of her married life, her day-to-day activities had been impacted by Opa's demands. But when Alma moved to the barn, the context was very different. There were far fewer constraints on her time and activities. There was no one telling her what she must do and when. There was real liberty, a year of jubilee, and you could see it in how she carried herself and went about her day. So while her body was declining, she pursued life with a vigor matching that of a much younger woman. She would call friends to pray with them or commiserate. She made lunch for the kids. She would entertain guests. She would make random dinners to send upstairs with Frank for the family. There were 12 steps leading from Alma's place to where the rest of the family lived. Alma hated stairs, but she looked at those 12 steps as a personal challenge. It was her own Mount Everest, and so carefully, deliberately, she began to practice going up those stairs. First, she did only one or two, and then she made sure she was able to come back down. But eventually, she gathered her courage and managed to make it all the way to the top. This was Alma's beautiful struggle, to do what her heart was determined to do, so free and bright, and to convince her body to come along for the ride. But it was clear to everyone that this was not going to last forever. Eventually, Alma's body would win out, and the struggle would give way to a glorious eternal victory. Alma's place downstairs would become a memorial. Frank and Alma had conversations about this from time to time. Frank was in the process now of planting the blueberry field, and he knew it would be at least a couple years before they had any real fruit. As the two of them talked, he felt compelled to ask Alma to make a promise. You see, as Frank's plans had begun to take shape for the field, they included having a plan for dealing with hundreds of pounds of blueberries every year. He considered selling them fresh or making preserves, but these options would take up a lot of time and were unappealing to him. Then he began to consider making wine. This felt different. It was a slow, deliberate exercise over a long period of time. It preserved the fruit in an exciting way. He was all for it. So when Frank and Alma talked, he asked her to promise that she would stick around until she got to taste the first wine made from the fruit of this field. In his mind, that was the culmination of his lofty dream. He wanted to plant the field, tend the field, harvest the fruit, and make the wine. He was asking her to stay until he was done, and in many ways it was unfair to ask. But Alma obliged and made the promise, a promise she knew she could not control. Of course, Frank knew this too. Only time would tell whether she would get to see him finish what he started. All right, thanks for listening. Have a great day.